Were you taught in high school how almost a 500,000 Mexican American U.S. citizens were sent back to, not back, they were born in America, they were U.S. citizens. They were rounded up in buses and bussed across the border to Mexico and just dropped off. This happened in the 30s. Did
Yeah,
you ever
no,
hear
that
about that?
never spoken of. Never.
So basically, the market crash, everything's going bad, and this is what white folks decided to do. They started looking around and saying, the economy's bad. What are we gonna do? And they're like, now notice everyone's unemployed, but
Yeah.
they go, look at all these damn Mexicans laying around, and it was pushed as an illegal immigration thing, but lowball estimates of 350,000 U.S. citizens, up to a 500,000 U.S. citizen Mexican Americans were loaded up, rounded up by police, by army, and just dropped off in Mexico. Imagine that. Would you say you're Irish? You said,
I'm Irish and Italian, mostly Italian.
imagine being rounded up by the government and just dropped off in Ireland.
Yeah, that'd be
That's
pretty
what we did.
ridiculous. Pretty ridiculous.
So when people talk about we're okay with it as long as it's legal, no, you're not. Your father wasn't, your grandfather wasn't, and your great grandfather wasn't. You've always done this style. You're just doing it a different way. And I think that's what we need to start doing. We need to start sharing the information, and we need to start putting it out there. The way Candace Owens is putting out her stuff, let her speak. But we need to start saying those things. One thing I probably say 50 times a day, when you hear Republicans talking about how Dixiecrats and all that stuff, ask them two questions. Who is Lee Atwater, and what is the Southern strategy? Shuts it down every single time. Lee Atwater was one of the principal architects of the Southern strategy, and the Southern strategy was, we, the Republicans, are not doing very well when it comes to getting votes. We need to steal, we need to take the racist white voter from the Democrats and win them over to us. So this was a campaign beginning under Nixon to take the Democratic racist white man and get him to become a Republican. It worked so well that Lee Atwater did he did a video recording bragging about how well it worked. They never hoped for it. They said, listen, we're never going to get the black vote. We're never going to get it. But I think we can get this white voter. So that's when you started seeing this narrative of black men raping white women, of black men taking jobs, because, and that's why I'm amazed when black people are pro-wall. They're like, well, they're going to take our jobs. Like, you realize you were the Mexican 30 years ago, right? For the Republican Party, you were the Mexican 30, 40 years ago. So that's what they talk about. Blacks are going to take your jobs and everything. So as the Democrats became more diverse, the Republicans used that. They weaponized it to get that white voter who was scared of that. And that's what happened from Nixon all the way through Reagan. Welfare queen. I'm sure you heard about
Oh
that.
yeah.
This was all part of their structure. To where now, because it's not openly taught, they're leveraging people's ignorance to where because they won't be forward about that. You will run into a Republican, they will name every Dixiecrat politician that was a Democrat. But it's a magic trick where it wasn't about the politician. It was about the people who put the politician in the office. Republicans said, keep the politicians, Democrats. We just want the voter. And that's what happened.
That's
Lee Atwater.
That's it's interesting that you say that. Did you see I don't know if you watched the Breakfast Club at all, but I love the Breakfast Club and Charlemagne the God especially. And did you see his interview with Joe Biden?
Oh yeah, I mean I had to, otherwise I would have lost my black card.
That's according to Joe Biden, and it brought something up to me that it's that I think Charlemagne has voiced several times in recent years that it's like the Republican Party is not trying to pretend that they're for black people. Like, they're not trying to pretend that, but Democrats, and this is why I think Charlemagne was trying to ask Joe, what are you going to do for the black vote, for black people? And he didn't have a good response. And I think a lot of Democrats will just say and try, like, they use that they're pandering to them, and then they won't actually, when they get in office, do anything for these people.
Well, so I let me first say I understand where Charlemagne's coming from, but there's some things I would push back on. Democrats are open with what you call identity politics. They go after demographics. Republicans do the same thing, they just don't say it. It's kind of like a person who says, I don't like religion. But I argue that I never met anyone that doesn't have a religion. Your religion might be money. Your religion might be yourself. There's a lot of people who think because their religion doesn't have a book, it's not a religion. If you're a materialistic guy who lies to women and does whatever you got to do to get what you want, and then once you have it, you forget it, that's a religion, bro. So Republicans, again, so the Republicans did a couple things with the Southern strategy. They also took a good sprinkling of libertarianism. So libertarians came up around this time too, right? They started in the 40s, but they started getting traction. So libertarians came up, and Republicans heard the libertarian approach, and they're like, I like this, this, and this. The parts they liked was everybody for themselves. You know, everybody should take care of themselves. So what the official stance on racism for the Republicans after that point was, we are 100% against formal institutional racism. So laws for racism. Equally so, we are 100% against any legislation mitigating racism. So what Republicans have been doing since the 60s is saying, we're not going to hurt you, but we're not going to help. We're not going to make the problem worse, but we are not going to engage the problem. And that's where you see in this Republican narrative of the best thing you can do for a person is just to leave them alone. Here's the problem. They started defunding inner city programs, but they didn't defund white programs, white neighborhoods. Like even with business, Nixon would go on and, you know, Nixon's like, I love the black power, letting them work for themselves, give them the power to do that. So he set up all these offices in the cities across America for teaching people how to write business plans. If we just get out of their way, they can take care of themselves. So you have these all over the country. Learn how to write a business plan. You know what didn't come with those business plan write-up centers? Money into those neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Now, SBA kept funneling money everywhere else in the country, but these were blackout zones. So while the white neighborhoods were getting FHA loans, VA loans, GI bills, easy credit, we were getting business plans. And you see that narrative a lot, not just but minorities, but the poor. Oh, the poor don't have money? Let's teach them how to budget. It's this assumption that whatever their situation is in, it's because of them.
Yeah, and I think it's something to me is kind of on top of that. With it's how can you think like that is what I'm saying, is how can you think that it's because of them when those people were literally, I mean, America's like stolen land in a sense. We used stolen people, forced them to create basically all of America, and then we forced them to live in ghettos and over police these very small areas, and it's just one layer after another, a different way to make sure that they don't have the full controller. They don't have all the buttons on their controller, and I do. And
that's what we say that in my family. We say that ever since we stopped working for free, America's been telling us we're the laziest people in America. The moment we stopped being slaves, suddenly we became lazy. It's hilarious.
Oh, yeah. And it's gross because the people that were considered to be these great businessmen and these great entrepreneurs would not have had shit had it not be for free labor.
And look what happened. Look at the South. To this very day, it still hasn't caught up. You know, that's where we kind of get into protectionism. Trump was going to tariff our way to prosperity. You know, if it's no different than if our parents protect us to where we never have to do our homework. So instead of us doing our homework, our mom just goes into class and flips out on the teacher so they give us an A. So we just keep going through the grades. But then eventually our mom's not there and we don't know anything and we're dumb as hell. So Protectionism gets you through the short term, but it makes you weak. And that's what you see here right now. You see this weakness that's coming out where people, like even this economic stuff, when I'll tell you another one too. You remember, you probably heard about the housing market crash.
Yes. Yeah.
People jumping out of windows and stuff like that.
Oh, I didn't know that. No, I had no idea about that.
Oh yeah. People committing suicide, jumping out of windows. No black people were jumping out of windows, bro. No black people were jumping out of windows because now they're poor. Black people were like, oh, okay, so it's just another day. All right, bet. So whatever. Like, it's a different mentality of where if you're just given everything, and not only are you given everything, you were told that you earned it. And that's what you're saying. You were given things and you were told you earned it. Even citizenship, to look down on a Mexican, even if they are legal, even if you watch them crawl across the dirt, to look down on them and to say you don't belong, the balls that takes. You did not row across that river with George Washington. You were not there fighting back the redcoats. You won the cosmic lottery. You did nothing, absolutely nothing.
Literally nothing, yeah.
And the majority, because only 3% of Americans have done civil service or government service, I think maybe 4%. So the majority of us, even after the fact, have not even tried to do something to get back. Now, what does the guy normally say? Well, I pay my taxes. No, you don't. No, you don't. Even if you do, bro, you don't. There is no amount of tax to pay for people putting their lives on the line so you can sit there and believe that you personally deserve something more than another man born in this world. So then what do they do next? Well, it's the Constitution. Constitution's a piece of paper, bro.
Exactly. That's the one thing with when people will say like, "Oh, show me a law that's inherently racist and all of these things that's downright racist and all this type of nonsense." Where it's like, dude, because if it's legal or if it's not legal, it doesn't mean people aren't going to do it. And the thing that like when they say like, "Oh, you can't blame these older folks for when they use a hard R or they say this or that or they think this way, you can't blame them." It's like, well, just because it was legal to have another human being on a chain and whip them when you felt like it, does that make it okay? And obviously, none of us can go back and think how they were thinking in that moment, but you're telling me that no part of you thinks that is wrong.
And I say this, they want it both ways. So they'll say that, those were different times. It was a different mentality, it's a different way of thinking. You can't apply today's thinking to that. That's not fair. That same person will look me in the face in 2020 and tell me, well, you have to admit, Ray, things are a lot better than they were in the 60s.
Yeah.
So you want me to time travel to a time before I was even born and say thank you for it being better than the 60s. So these are all examples of disjointed thought where I want to do what you do. This is me talking to a white guy who talks like that. I want to do what you do. When you're looking at your life, you never sit there and say, well, at least I got it better than the 1920s. You don't do that. If your boss gives you a 20% raise and you walk out the office and you tell the other coworkers, I just got a 20% raise. And then you find out that the boss gave all of them a 50% raise. Your ass is mad.
Yeah.
Even though you got a 20% raise, you don't say, well, I'm better than I was yesterday. No, you look around in the present and you say, what the hell? Everyone else got a 50% raise and I got a 20% raise. What am I? Am I trash? That's what you say.
Yeah.
So when you tell black people to concede that things are better today than they were in the 60s, that's what you're asking them to do. You're asking them to ignore what you got. You're saying, don't look at me. That's too much. Don't aspire to live the way I live, even though I didn't earn it. Compare yourself to your people back in the 60s. These are the things that people do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how do we defeat it? We have these conversations. You pay that one forward. You know what? That's how you do it, because these ways of thinking, they exist because they were born from people not talking to each other, and they're maintained by people not talking to each other. So the more we do these things, the more we connect, the weaker and the less power these ideas and these narratives will be. Because I was that black kid, man. I was that black kid having grown ass white men asking me these questions, and I didn't know the answer. And they had me believing things about myself and my people that are not true. Think about that. You're a 16, 17-year-old kid and a white man, well, looking well, suit, tie, whatever. And he goes, you know, why do you think your people don't have anything if you're equals? And if you have a public school education, that comes off as a reasonable question.